my old life is over and this is my new one. And, I want to be awake for this one.
Mhm.
I want to, whatever I've been given. And let me try to not judge this life the way I judged my first one. Let me just experience it, and that's been pretty much my guiding star for the last 23 years.
Over 1 million Americans face sentencing every year, and it will be the most important day of their lives. But we don't fully understand the system, how broken it is, and what we can do to make it better. I'm Doug Passon. I'm a 25-year criminal defense lawyer and a sentencing expert. My goal is to bring more awareness, more fairness, and more humanity to the sentencing process. So, are you ready? Then let's get set for sentencing. Hey everybody, Doug Passon coming to you from Studio 3553 in Scottsdale, Arizona. It's been a little while since we've done some set for sentencing, but we're back in the saddle and we couldn't have picked a better guest to jump back in than Jeff Grant Esquire. We're going to spend some time talking with Mr. Grant, hearing his journey, which is a very interesting one. And I won't spoil the surprise. We'll get there. But let's just say he's had a very in-depth view of the criminal justice system from many perspectives. So we'll put a pin in that. But the real reason we wanted to have Jeff on here, well, not the real reason, but it just so happens that there's an upcoming conference that Mr. Grant has organized called the White Collar Conference. It's an online conference, and I really wanted the opportunity to make sure that people hear about this and spread the word because it's a really amazing endeavor. So we're going to talk about all of that today. So I'm done with my fancy introduction, and let me start by welcoming Jeff Grant to Set for Sentencing. How are you today, sir?
I'm great, Doug. Thank you so much. Thank you for and pushing the conference up right to the front of the.
Yes.
I wouldn't want to bury the lead on that one.
Absolutely not. So we're gonna talk about that in great detail. You have some incredible speakers lined up, and it's an online conference, so anybody can do it. It's on October 11th. It's going to be on Zoom, so we'll have all the links in the show notes for people to register and get on that bandwagon. So we'll come back to that. But I am, very my heart and soul is storytelling, and
Mhm.
I'm always curious, especially because you and I have not met. We've been sort of circling each other's orbit on LinkedIn and these various platforms, but this is the first time we've had an opportunity to spend time together and get to know one another. So I would love to know your origin story. I mean, just lay it out there. I teased it, but it's a good one.
Well, nice teasing, thank you. The I was a lawyer, and I'm a lawyer again, and there was about almost 20 years in between where I wasn't a lawyer. I had a successful firm, mostly doing general counsel work for real estate families in New York and in equities and in management and brokerage. But a smattering of other things too. And I got hurt playing basketball in 1992 and developed an addiction to prescription painkillers. And that kind of took me down over the next 10 years to the point where I started to make some mistakes and some big ones. The first big mistake I made was commingling of attorney-client funds with operating funds in order to make payroll. And then the second one I did was I applied for a SBA loan at the time and I misrepresented myself on the application. A lot of people have done that in the last 5 years since the pandemic.
Yeah.
But I can tell you that for the 20 years or so I've told my story in various venues, the least sexy part of my story was SBA loan fraud. And yet now that's the thing that a lot of people, connect with, obviously, because there's millions of people out there who are either being investigated or prosecuted or concerned that they might be. So I resigned my law license in 2002 and tried to kill myself with an overdose of painkillers. A few days later, wound up in rehab, and then that was really the first part of my life over. never really looked back from there. Went through 7 weeks of rehab and entered Alcoholics Anonymous, and I've never had a drink or a drug for the last 23 years. So,
Wow. Good for you.
yeah, so there, I mean, there's the deep background.
Wow.
Um,
All right. Well, before we go, because I'm curious, your story is, while it may seem unique, a lot of aspects I are not in our, especially in our profession. I always say this job is can be hazardous to your health. And yeah, yes, your addiction comes from pain and your injury. My guess is the stress of managing the law practice, making all your deadlines, making all your clients happy, making sure the money's coming in. It was all just kind of a perfect storm, right? And my question is, what, what do you think were the big obstacles at that moment for you to reach out for a lifeline and try to get some help before, when you were drowning?
yeah, it's a great question. I didn't really even know what I was going through. I was in deep denial. And I think that most people who have maladaptive behavior, like criminal behavior, there's deep-rooted things going on. In my case, childhood trauma. I also have since been diagnosed with bipolar disorder.
Mm,
And so I didn't really know that I was self-medicating. But I want anybody who was around me, back in the days of all the legal stress and everything, kind of knew that I had these huge mood swings. And people would line up at the door of my office and ask my assistant, who's, which Jeff is here today? Is it, smart Jeff or crazy Jeff?
mm,
And they knew, but I didn't really know.
mm,
And I've had this conversation, with legal assistance groups, for example. I'm on the American Bar Association Council for Legal Assistance, and they want to provide these services, but nobody's gonna accept the services until they're ready,
yeah.
and they've hit some kind of bottom, or at least very few will. And I was definitely one of them. So I knew I was doing crazy things. I just didn't know that there was a way out, or I was just too, you
Was
know,
there no one around you to sort of hold the mirror up and say, Jeff, what the fuck, man? Like, come on. Who were those voices where it doesn't sound like either they weren't there or you weren't listening to them. Which was it?
well, I think mostly I wasn't listening, because when I
Yeah.
when I was in rehab, it was my fifth or sixth day in rehab. Our best friends came. I was in rehab in New Canaan, Connecticut, and our best friends came to visit. And I was crying. My whole life was in shambles. I didn't have a career. My reputation was gone. I was about to lose my house, my marriage, and I was crying to them. I said to them, I've seen you like once a month for the last 20 years. Why didn't you ever tell me that I was that I was nuts? And they looked at me and they said, "We must have told you 100 times."
Hmm.
And I don't remember one time that they've ever told me.
Wow.
So I think that that's the deep denial and shame and everything, just like keeping me in a place where I just could not get healthy without the rug being pulled out.
Yeah. That's powerful. That's powerful. I see that, I have some experience with this with my dear friends, colleagues, and I think back to my mentor who sadly took his own life. He succeeded. And it wasn't necessarily substance abuse that was plaguing him, but similar issues, bipolar, some mental health things. And he had a whole army of people around him that loved him and that were doing everything in their power to try to get him the help that he needed. But at the end of the day, one of the biggest barriers was his fear of being sort of outed as having a mental health issue. He
Yeah.
was a very high profile, very, well respected attorney.
Hmm.
And his greatest fear is if we had him committed, which looking back, that was the only way we could have saved his life.
Sure.
But I just feel like it's, the position that we're in, especially the higher we climb, the more entrenched we become in that, the more that denial services, basically, is very hard to wrap your head around unraveling your entire professional existence.
Yeah, well, when people are putting their lives in your hands, they certainly want to count on a certain amount of stability.
Yes.
As I've learned since that the more vulnerable I am and the more human and honest I am about things, people trust me more, not less.
Right.
It was just completely counterintuitive at the time.
Right. And so I want to keep going with your story, but I'm also interested in rehab because I've heard countless tales of people going to rehab, coming right out and getting right back to it. But clearly, rehab, it was what you needed, and you changed your. Was that really the linchpin in your recovery?
Well, I mean, everything I talk about is revisionist on some level, right? And
Yeah,
let's face it, but I do think that um, in my case, I was self-sabotaging. I needed that old life to end, and I just didn't know how to do it elegantly.
yeah.
And so I threw the grenade. It blew up. Thank God, either I didn't die, or my kids, or my ex-wife didn't go completely off the deep end. But when I came out of my fog, and it was at some point during rehab, I definitely recognized that. Listen, my old life is over, and this is my new one, and I want to be awake for this one.
Mhm.
I want to, whatever I've been given, and let me try to not judge this life the way I judged my first one. Let me just experience it, and that's been pretty much my guiding star for the last 23 years.
Okay, that's amazing. So at some point though, you're getting indicted and you're having to go through the criminal process. Where in this timeline does this happen?
So I got sober, and then 20 months later, I got a phone call actually from a special agent who told me there was a warrant out for my arrest in connection with the loan misrepresentations that I'd made.
Hmm.
And I asked him if they were going to come pick me up, and he said no, but we'll give you 2 weeks to turn yourself in. Hired a lawyer, and 2 weeks later, I was down at the federal courthouse at 500 Pearl Street, which Manhattan at that point was, still like a war zone post 9/11.
Oh my, yeah.
And I felt like the worst person in the world as I were going through checkpoints, and there were machine guns on the street, with the armed vehicles, and that was the first time I ever had handcuffs on, and the first time I really had to come to terms with the fact that I had done something illegal, and now I was going to have to pay for it.
What did you learn about lawyering by becoming a lawyer's client?
Oh, well, I think in the years since I've learned a ton. Probably could talk about that for hours. At the time, I was numb. I was not really able to determine a lot, but we could certainly go into the story about how much compassion and empathy and things I've developed since then. But I was treated very well. I was treated well by the marshals. I was treated well by the court. I was treated, and I think the reason why was that for many of them, it was, but for the grace of God go I kind of thing. I had, I accept 100% responsibility, but I blew up my life over a representation on a loan, which, by the way, we have a board member of the Federal Reserve who's going through something similar right now. Probably thought that it was innocent, and all of a sudden now bearing a lot of scrutiny.
Right.
And so it was a time and a place, and it happened to be post 9/11, and I was being looked at. But I did learn a lot of lessons about being a better lawyer and understanding what the downside could be, and about not only taking risk personally as a lawyer, but also in counseling people as to what risks can be, and what my job should be essentially as a general counsel.
Was there anything you wished your lawyers would have done differently?
Um, that's a great. I don't think so, because on the first day I knew I was gonna. I was going to plead. I mean, when I called up my lawyer, a friend who was a friend of mine, I just said, let's just make arrangements for me to plea and go through the process. I mean, I was getting sober. I didn't really even care so much about the legal system as much as I cared about my mental health and my sobriety. And as it turns out, I was not very fragile in terms of my sobriety, but I know a lot of people who would have drank over it, but I
Yeah,
didn't. I did not.
absolutely. Okay, so you end up taking a plea then. What was the sentence? What was the outcome?
18-month sentence. I did get a downward variance
Okay, good.
of a little bit, 3 months. And on Easter Sunday of 2006, I reported to Allenwood Low. So I went to a low. I did not go to a camp.
Why?
That's a great question. The best I've been able to make of it was that there were no beds available
Yeah,
in a camp on the day I got within 500 miles of my house on the day I got designated. And so, they gave me a management variable and bumped me up. And at the time, I don't know what it's like now, but at the time, I couldn't get a modification. I can't remember what it was called at the time, but I couldn't get redesignated for a year. And I knew I was only going to serve 13 or 14 months.
right.
And frankly, it wasn't nearly as bad as I thought it was going to be. I never felt unsafe. I certainly learned a lot during that year. Um, and I didn't have anything to compare it to, really. I mean,
Yeah,
it wasn't like now where there's a lot of information in the media and a lot of information online. Back then, there barely was an online. So I really had nothing to compare it to. And
right.
I did my time. I tried to do it with dignity.
Okay, so what was your experience? Every facility has its own culture. I've heard different things about different places, just in terms of the way the facility was run, the way that you were treated, the programming that was offered. Was it how does it rate?
Well, mostly I got a job in rec. So I did
Hmm.
not get a job like in the education building. I needed to get healthy. I'd spent the last 20 years behind a desk, sedentary, so I needed to get healthy. So I walked 10 miles a day. I took workout courses. I took 200 guitar lessons while I
Oh,
was
nice.
so I can
Yeah,
shred.
you got a fellow guitarist here. That's my jam.
Oh yeah, I can
In fact,
shred a
wait,
little.
you can see the guitar in the background.
Oh, there we go.
There we go.
I I
You can
mostly
shred a
play
little.
a little bit. I play a 1969 SG.
Very
And
nice. Who
yeah.
taught guitar at the prison?
Well, there were three guys who had been members of bands. One of them a producer, and two guys who had been in bands. I mean, I guess, they weren't in bands I would have heard of, but they were professional musicians, and they basically ran the music department, and they were thrilled to have me there, someone to teach.
That's great. Do you still
Yeah.
play?
Oh yeah, all the time. It's therapy.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
I started when I was 14 and it would save my life. I mean,
Oh yeah.
and back then, I had lots of time to just lock myself in my room and learn every Kiss song ever made. So,
Absolutely.
well, I love that. What kind of support did you have from your network, your friends, your family, your loved ones when you were in there? Or was it kind of out of sight, out of mind?
No, I had a
No.
lot. I had a lot of my AA group from Greenwich, Connecticut, where I was living. A
Oh,
lot,
good.
a lot of my AA group came to visit me. My girlfriend, now my wife, Lynn, she came to visit. My kids, my two daughters came to visit,
Oh,
and
good.
even my ex-wife came to visit. I had a lot of visits, and as probably people have probably told you, visits in prison are kind of like a mixed blessing. It's wonderful to have, but it kind of disrupts the flow. But I'm grateful. I'm grateful for it, and the time went super fast. It was like the blink of an eye, and then I was out of there.
Wow. Okay. All right. So talk to me about your your redemption story. Well, you've had a lot of redemption stories from getting sober to taking responsibility for the criminal stuff, but I'm so happy that you're a lawyer again. I just feel like our profession eats, they chew us up and they spit us out, and without any regard for the stress and strain of the profession, our suicide rate is off the charts, right? And
Yeah.
so, I mean, I've been a criminal defense lawyer my whole career, so of course I'm going to be one who believes in second chances, but in my experience, the bar is not always that entity that's willing to give second chances. So it's amazing to hear that you got it, and I would love to know, how that process went.
Well, after I got home from prison, I decided prison was part of my faith journey, and I knew I wanted to be of service, but even if I couldn't practice law. So I applied to and went to Union Theological Seminary for 3 years and got a master's of divinity and then started working in the churches. And I'm now an ordained reverend. But a couple of years later, we started this ministry to support white collar criminals and their families. So the white collar support group started from that ministry, and we have been doing that for almost 10 years. We meet every Monday night on Zoom.
Nice.
Our This Monday will be our 481st meeting.
Wow.
And I was just doing ministry work and helping people through and helping them spiritually and emotionally. But almost every one of those people had lawyer issues, both prosecution issues and issues with their own lawyers too. I mean,
Yes.
it's a real mixed bag of people who are really suffering and have very, very few resources to really be able to depend upon. And so at 2018, I decided like the greatest service I could do is try to get my law license back and then be someone who all these people who are going through the criminal justice system, they be a lawyer they could trust. And I would have street cred. So it took me 3 years to get my law license back,
Mhm.
and which happened in May of 2021. And I've kind of hit the ground running since then, spending probably half of my time representing people who are going through the justice journey. I'm not a criminal lawyer,
Oh,
but
you're not?
I'm not. I'm not.
Okay.
I help them with everything other than criminal law, even though I
Oh.
work closely with their criminal lawyers. So, people don't really realize when someone's going through a criminal prosecution, everything in their life is being taken down. So
Mhm.
their businesses, their marriages, their real estate, their unwinding this, partner problems here, and they go to their criminal defense lawyers and they say, "What do I do?" And for the most part, the criminal defense lawyers say, "I have no idea what to do. I mean,
Yeah.
that's not what I do." But I was, dyed-in-the-wool general counsel business lawyer. And so now I can apply that to people's lives and kind of over a longer trajectory than just the criminal case itself, try to help them actually sort out all the stuff, make good decisions in the beginning, and hopefully find their own redemption story at the somewhere down the line.
And this white collar support group, just so people who are listening know, I'm going to put a link in the show notes too, but I've got it pulled up. It's prisonist.org. That's the site
That's
for
right.
that, right? Yeah. So
Resist.org.
prisonist.org, prisonist.org. I'll put the link in the show notes, but it says that you have given support to over 1,400 justice impacted individuals over the course of the last 9 or so years. That's incredible.
Yeah,
Incredible.
it's closer to 1600 now.
Yeah.
I don't, I,
Amazing.
you have to update that. And every Monday night, there are 40 or 50 people who come online, and it's run pretty much like an AA meeting. It's people getting support. I mean, we have a very specific agenda. There's a resource sharing, and and there's a topic every Monday. Someone leads on a topic. This coming Monday, for example, is service sets us free. Sometimes the topics are much more technical about actually surviving in prison or on the way to prison or perhaps after prison. And sometimes they're just emotional, like dealing with family or the crushing weight of shame, and all things that people want to learn about and talk about. And it's amazing to see someone come on who's been living in isolation for years, probably, and they just need to let loose and to have like a willing audience to be able to, hear them and help them through their pain is really an incredible experience.
And these are people at any stage of the proceeding that could just be freshly indicted, awaiting trial, trying to resolve their case. It does any, or they've already been through the system.
All different points of entry. We've had people come on who are actually years ahead of their indictment, for example, or maybe they're just going through a
Yeah.
regulatory issue.
Yeah.
And we've had people who come on in anticipation of it because they've done some research and they've looked online. And then
Yeah.
we've had people who come on where their case has been over for 10 years, but they need some support, or they feel like they've never really gotten back on their feet the right way and they want to know what other people's experience has been.
Wow, it's amazing. The power of community is, I mean, it cannot be understated. And I do a lot of work now in the autism space, and
Hmm.
there's an amazing group called D3, Decriminalizing Developmental Disabilities, and they do a similar monthly. They call it the Wine and Wine. So WHINE and WINE. So it's a
That's
in
great.
the evening, and but it's parents of who have
For
children that are
sure.
going through the system. It's justice impacted autistic individuals themselves. It's professionals like me, and I see it like in real time how much it means to have some kinship. Just to know that as horrible as the situation they're going through is, they are not alone.
Exactly.
And yeah, so I want to make sure people know about that support group. I probably have a dozen or so clients I could have signed up for that. We could
Send them
really
over,
use
Doug.
it. Yeah. All right. So now, well, what did I forget in terms of your journey? Because I'm going to segue into the white collar conference, but I want to make sure I didn't miss anything really good.
I think that those are the hot spots. I mean,
Okay.
right now, to be able to deliver in new ways, in different ways, to like widen our audience, because you have a criminal justice podcast, and for the most part, we're all talking to ourselves.
Yeah.
There's a very limited audience. I mean, it may be somewhat large, but still, the wider network of people out there really don't know what we do.
Right.
And so we were trying to find ways to widen it and also to deepen our penetration of what we could actually accomplish. And so the two things that we're working on now, one is our criminal justice conference, and the second is our federal expungement initiative.
Hmm.
And and they're kind of running in parallel because the conference, which is on October 11th online, is kind of a driver of people's interest and of sponsors, and it's a tangible thing. People know what a conference is.
Hmm.
And so it's going to be on October 11th at 9 a.m. Eastern, 6 a.m. Pacific. So you guys out in Scottsdale, if you want to tune in, it's going to be awfully early.
Okay. Well,
Not
that's
so bad.
okay. That's not so bad. And so let's talk about this lineup. Oh my goodness. Keynote address Jeffrey Toobin. I guess he just wrote a book on the pardon
Yeah,
process.
yeah. Well, Jeffrey Toobin is a CNN commentator,
Mhm.
lawyer, very well-known guy, and he's
Yes.
had some second chance issues of his own.
Yes, he has. He has.
And we're certainly hoping he's going to share how he's come through those issues and kind of be a beacon of hope for our audience, who most of whom have to meet those challenges. So Jeffrey Toobin did write a book recently called The Pardon, and it's about the Nixon pardon, and then he relates it to kind of the climate of our current and former administrations, and why pardons have become so much a part of the culture now.
Yeah. Okay. Is
And
is
then,
that book out? I gotta
oh yeah,
read
the
that
book is
book.
yeah, the book is
Okay.
out. Yeah,
I
the book
gotta
is
read
out.
that. That sounds really fascinating.
Oh yeah, that was part of the deal, in order for us to get him as our keynote, we had to promote the book. So
Okay.
So there we are.
All right.
I am
When you
promoting.
talk to him, see if he'll come on my podcast. I'll promote the daylights out of that book. I'd love to talk about that. I'm fascinated by these pardons, what's happening in the pardon space. Okay, so yeah, put in the good word for me, man.
I will do it.
Um,
I will do it.
and then Joe Bankman, father of Sam Bankman-Fried. What's Joe talking about?
Well, Joe is another fascinating guy. You know, Joe and his wife Barbara are both law professors at Stanford.
Yep,
And of course, you know, Sam Bankman-Fried had one of the highest profile prosecutions in history.
sure.
And of course, the family had to learn how to navigate that. And he's going to talk all about how you survive and then and what you know what the actual effect is on the family and then how you survive it, especially such a high profile prosecution. And especially as a Stanford law ethics professor who I think some people, you know, have questions like, how is it that you didn't know that this was going on? I mean, the same questions they asked me that you just asked me recent, you know, during this podcast.
Yeah,
And he's going to be interviewed by Brent Cassidy, who's one of our support group members. And I know that Joe is going to be willing to bear a lot of his soul and a lot of the truth because I've spoken with him many times at this point.
yeah, yeah.
And so that's a big get too. So
That's a huge get.
there's two.
Huge get. And, I followed that case very closely. And, I've done a couple podcasts on that specifically and really through the context of autism spectrum
Of
disorder.
course, of course.
And yeah,
It's hard for me to believe that that wasn't the central theme of his case,
right.
and yet I'm not even sure that it really came up it much at all.
N no, it didn't. It didn't come up at trial in the slightest, which it was surprising to me. And it did come up at sentencing very, very peripherally.
Mhm.
But, I see that a lot. And it's not to run any lawyers down or disparage. But, autism wasn't on my radar until I had a son on the autism spectrum.
Yeah.
And I lived that journey and I started to become more attuned to the issue. And so I think about when you think about the statistics from the CDC, how many people now are on the autism spectrum, it's something like 1 in 31.
Mhm.
So I've extrapolated the numbers of probably over 1,000 clients I've represented in my 30 years of lawyering. How many did I miss? Because I
Yeah.
just didn't know what it was or why it mattered so much to if you go to the Autism Speaks website, they have a little justice page, and it says
Yeah.
first thing it says is autism is relevant to every stage of the criminal proceeding.
How about that?
But lawyers don't know what they don't know sometimes. So I've been on a mission to sort of put that on people's radar, which is why I'm kind of shining a little bit of a light on it today, but I digress. So tell me about.
Actually, I don't think it's a digression, and I just want to make kind of like a practice point
Okay,
here.
good. We
It's really
love practice
important.
points on this
Yeah, it's
podcast.
an important thing. As the defendants have to be willing to advocate for themselves and understand that who they choose as a lawyer is of huge importance in how their case is going to go. And and you don't need to be a slave to what your lawyers think is the right or wrong. You have to kind of look inside yourself a little bit and understand. So if your lawyer's not actually prepared to listen and understand where you're coming from and what your life issues have been, or the lawyer has kind of a mind of his or her own, you know, maybe it's wait, stop, let's put on the brakes here. Either we're going to be able to work as a team and figure this out, or maybe I should be looking for a new lawyer. And
Yes.
and it's okay for that to happen. I would say the statistics, especially in white collar cases, of people who change lawyers midstream, the last I checked, it's over 50%.
Yeah.
So I just think that it's important for people to be as self-aware and aware as possible.
Yeah. Which is not easy to do when you're under that kind of stress and strain and you have no experience in the legal system, you know.
Of
You
course.
just people just assume, well, they're a lawyer and they've got, a very fancy office, so they must know exactly what they're doing. And that is not always the case. So yeah, it's an excellent it's an excellent point. And when if a client asks me like, how do I know? I mean, if my lawyer's doing a good job for me, and that's a very complicated question. It may be, have they filed any motions or whatever. But my simplest thing is, what do they know about you as a human being?
Mm,
What have they asked you? Just like, what are you into? I'm very glad I found out you love to play guitar, right? I
mhm,
doubt, most lawyers would have learned that about you in their first, second, third, or
mhm.
12th meeting because we're not trained to be human beings in a sense. We're
Yeah.
trained to be automatons, get to the fact. Issue, rule, application, conclusion. That's what we're trained to do. And think like a lawyer, talk like a lawyer, dress like a lawyer. Don't get connected, don't get personally involved. Just, eyes on the prize, and that may work in areas outside of criminal law. I don't know. I've never practiced outside criminal law, but that doesn't work for criminal defense. It just doesn't.
Well, as a general counsel, as someone who gets involved with people's lives and people's, businesses and everything, it's my job to understand what their goals are and many times interfacing with their criminal defense lawyers and because I have street cred, I mean the client is willing to talk to me about things that he might never have talked to his criminal or she may have talked to their criminal defense lawyer about. And so I'm often put in the position where the value add is to bridge that.
And how often do you run up with of resistance where the lead lawyer is like, that's not important. I don't care about.
Well, I do have to admit that a lot of the time that I get retained, if it's mid case,
Yeah.
um, I'm the new sheriff in town, and lawyers don't like that.
Yes.
But it always comes down to kind of the same things, like how much money have they been paid up front? How what's the burn rate
Yeah.
of um and so here's another practice point I'll tell people if you're listening in. If you get arrested, basically you don't need to hire your forever lawyer just to get out of jail and go home. You actually can take some time to like pull back and start to do some good research as to like who's the right lawyer and for what reasons. And you don't have to pay a lawyer a ton of money in the very beginning based on their promises that the pain will go away soon.
Mm-hmm.
Because I will tell you, of the 3,000 or so people that I've helped through this journey in one way or another, the pain does not go away soon, no matter what someone tells you. The pain's going to be there. And if you're looking for a quick fix, it's not going to happen.
Right. Yeah, and if they're selling you on a quick fix, that's the first and biggest red flag
That's
that they're
right.
not the right ones for you.
That's
I,
right.
that's the other question I would have them ask I would ask them is, what did they promise you? If the answer is nothing, you may be in good hands.
Absolutely.
I'm the same way because I consult, I do these mitigation movies, so I'm brought in. I'm often the new sheriff in town too, and that to me is another mark of a good lawyer. A leader has a growth mindset, not a fixed mindset. And if somebody's coming to the team with good qualifications and they're open to working and collaborating and learning, maybe learning something, and I learn from other lawyers all the time, then that's a great sign. But if they're defensive and closed off and resistant to this, huge red flag, huge red flag.
Well, I'm really appreciating this conversation because for the most part, for people out there who don't know, for the most part, there are very few white collar trials. So whether someone's a defense lawyer or been a prosecutor for the last 25 years, chances are they haven't really been on a lot of white collar trials.
Yeah.
And but somehow they're selling you credentials that may not really be useful in the long run to you. But whether they're what they're willing to do is to bear the process to you and make you a part of it and tell you the truth. I mean, that's a big deal.
Yeah.
And so unfortunately, a lot of lawyering is about managing expectations.
Yeah.
And so I think that's why anyone who's in that type of trauma, or if you have a mental illness background or a drug and alcohol background, in a way, I don't even know how you could sign a sophisticated contract with someone without having someone look at the contract. It almost feels like you have to hire a lawyer to
Yeah.
represent you in signing a contract with your lawyer.
Yeah.
And so, I don't want to get too into the weeds
Yeah.
on this, but
Yeah.
just like,
That's a good conversation though, because so many times people get into a situation and then they're just either too afraid or they're too financially impacted to get out of it.
that's
I
right.
I would love to switch horses midstream, but I just feel like I can't, and
Right.
I would love people to know that, don't ever feel stuck. There's always a way forward.
That's right.
And so, well, let's go back to the conference. So I want to make sure
Oh, yeah.
we don't have to talk about the whole agenda, but there are just major, just just a great lineup. It's 3 hours, right? Tell me
Yeah.
about costs. What's the cost?
The cost is $10. And
$10. That's awesome. All right,
and,
$10.
and let me tell you why it's $10.
Yeah,
It's really free. It's not like we need everybody's $10
yeah.
in order to run things. But the $10 and a credit card number keeps the Zoom bombers away from the
Oh,
conference. And
okay.
there will be enough people, probably three or 400 people online, that the chances of the Zoom link getting out could be, a problem.
Yeah.
So so that'll keep the Zoom bombers away. The fact that they have to identify themselves in order to,
Interesting.
yeah.
Good. And there are also sponsorship opportunities. Are those still available or is that ship sailed?
No, they're very available. In
Okay,
fact,
so because we have lawyers and clients or potential clients listening, so if we got some lawyers or professionals out there who want to sponsor, can you talk a little bit about what those opportunities are?
sure, the conference website is whitecollarconference.com. So that's not a hard one to remember,
Hmm.
whitecollarconference.com. And our title sponsor, our lead sponsor is Paul Weiss. And so, that's an AmLaw 50 law firm. And so they're kind of our halo law firm. And so we have
I'm surprised they have any cash left over. Didn't they commit all their pro bono money to the current administration?
well,
We won't go there. Did I just say that? See,
uh,
sometimes I can't help myself.
for
I could cut that from the podcast if you
no,
like.
that's okay. For a law firm that gives away $100 million worth of pro bono services a year,
Yeah.
when we started our federal expungement initiative, which we can talk about a little bit, but
Yeah,
basically,
I would love to.
yeah. But we went to Paul Weiss and we said, will you give us some pro bono time? And they said yes. So they did the background research for our federal expungement project and wrote us a sizable check to be our lead sponsor.
Wow.
So
Good for them.
yeah, so we have,
I think that's important for people to know because I'm sure everybody's running them down along with the other firms that are swept up in that nonsense, but they're still out there doing really good work and that's important to know.
yeah, and
Good on them.
and I try not to solve people's complicated problems with my simple solutions. And I'm sure all of these were very, very complicated issues, but
Yes.
they've been good to us and good to our community.
Well,
So we
that's what
have
counts.
we have law firms, we have service providers, consulting firms. We have firms that are owned by, I mean, we have sponsors that Their companies are owned by people who formerly had white collar justice issues.
Nice.
And so we would love people to sponsor. We would love people to spread the word and be participants or be attendees. It's 3 hours, and we're going to have a whole section on pardons and expungement. And then we'll have some stories of people who've actually been through the system and have been helped by coming into community and not feeling so isolated. So basically, 4 45-minute blocks chock full of great information.
I love that. All right, well, let's talk for a little bit about federal expungement. So you've got another website, which is federalexpungement.org,
Yeah.
also an easy one. But what is, I've been a federal lawyer for a long time. My experience is limited, and I just remember doing some cursory research and saying expungement is the unicorn in federal court. It's just I don't know if I've ever heard of it happening at all. So what's the initiative and what success are you having?
Well, it hasn't happened because it doesn't exist,
Okay.
except for low-level juvenile drug cases, which are a little bit of an exception. But I was listening to a podcast, a webinar that Doug Berman from Ohio State and
Yeah.
Rachel Barkow were on, Rachel Barkow from NYU Law. And out of Rachel's mouth just came this one sentence. She said, there's nothing preventing Congress from passing a federal expungement law. And I didn't even know if I'd heard her correctly. It was just like it was in passing. So I
Okay.
called her up the next day and I said, "Is that true?" And she said, "Yeah. I mean, the pardon power by Constitution is limited, is the purview of the president, but Congress could pass an expungement law, and expungement would probably be more powerful than a pardon."
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, with the climate of what's going on with all these pardons, this might be an opportune time to actually try to get an expungement law passed.
Yeah.
So we put together this kind of star group of professors around the country who specialize in sentencing and pardon law and things like that. And we launched this federal expungement initiative, and it's picking up steam. And we're at the point now where we have a few dozen people who are either advocates or advisors, and we're going to be organizing this fall in writing legislation and getting sponsors in the Senate, hopefully in the Judiciary Committee, and the opportunity to exit the system if it passes, like there are in many, many states. 44 states have some form of expungement law on the books.
Yeah.
But if we're successful, there'll be a way to exit the system and give people an opportunity to get their lives back. Wouldn't that be fantastic?
So fantastic. Do you have your arms around the contours of what the statute looks like, or is that still being hammered out?
It's being hammered out, but as
Yeah.
of right now, what we think it will be is on the judiciary side, not on the executive side. And what we'll take is the best pieces from the states that are working well.
Yeah.
So you can imagine it's going to be X amount of years post justice involvement. There'll be some kind of understanding of how restitution will fit, or forfeiture will fit into that. I don't, that's a tough one.
Yeah.
We haven't fully thought that one out yet. But mostly the issue is going to be is how you've lived your life
Right.
since you got arrested.
Yeah.
And I love that because ultimately this is about a culture shift.
Sure.
Because if you need a job for 7 years, for example, post prison, someone has to give you a job. If you need to volunteer in order to get an expungement, someone has to allow you to volunteer. So it's really going to take the entire community to somehow work together and have the rising tide lift all the boats.
Yeah.
And maybe a lot of people who apply for expungement will not be able to get it. But if we've done our job right, then the entire culture will be lifted up and will be
Hmm.
more helpful and more inclusive and more accepting. And that's a good thing. And we'll work out the details of all of that because there's going to be a lot of diplomacy and politics involved.
That is a good thing. And I'm thinking about one of my favorite movies, Shawshank Redemption. and the line goes something like, "Hope is a good thing, and good things never die." And what expungement is just another hope for a happy ending. It's the ultimate redemption story.
No,
You've
well
gotten
put.
through this. You know, you've changed every aspect of your life, and then you have an opportunity to go back before the judge sentenced you and tell your story, tell your story.
Yep.
I'm
And
thinking about my work in mitigation movies. Those expungement proceedings would be ripe for a little documentary about. Anyway, shameless plug, but this is all about telling a good true story, right?
well, it is actually very similar. It's just the timeline is
Yeah.
different. But what I really one of the things I really like about it is that, at least in white collar situations, there's virtually no case management that goes, from the beginning of someone's justice involvement to the end of someone's justice involvement, because right now it's a life sentence. There is no
Yeah.
end.
Right.
But if you think about it in terms of like, what can I do from the very beginning to help my chances of ultimately getting my record expunged?
Hmm.
I think everybody's path would be potentially very different than it is right now.
Yeah.
The expungement pulls everybody through.
Right. Right. I love that. I hope you keep me posted, and if there's anything I can do to lend my voice to that, or we want to do another podcast. I've had Doug Berman on the podcast a few times. I've been on his. He
Mhm.
does great work, and man, I'm just so glad I think it took you a few times to get my attention, and I'm sorry about that, but I'm sure glad you did. And I'm really grateful that we made this connection. So I will be tuning in on October 11th. I don't care how early it is. And I can't wait to hear what all those folks have to say. And I hope everybody else does too. Again, all the links are going to be in the show notes, and your information for anybody who thinks they could use Jeff Grant's services. I would hope you wouldn't need them ever, but unfortunately people do. And you're a great resource. So thanks for doing this. And I always like to give the person in the hot seat the last word. What did I forget? Anything?
Well, I can tell you that sometimes I'm asked either by law school classes or business school classes or just people who are interviewing me. They ask me like, what's the one thing that you would do differently if you could? And there's no doubt about the one thing is I would live within my means, because as we talked about earlier in this podcast, the stress and the pressure is just huge to be able to succeed in this world. And and living above my means definitely was self-inflicted wounds that caused me to make some very poor decisions. And so if I were talking to my one of my daughters or my sons-in-law, I would say the same thing. Like, you don't have to move so fast. Just live within your means, do good work, put out good energy, hang out with good people, and life has a way of working out. And maybe you can avoid some of the things that we had to go through.
Perfect. Thank you, Jeff Grant, for all you do and for all you're doing for our community. I really appreciate you, and we'll talk soon.
Thank you, Doug. Wonderful.
That's it for today, but before we go, I just wanted to take a moment and say thank you to you, the listener, for spending time with us today getting set for sentencing. Whether you're a lawyer, someone who could use the help, or maybe you're just a true crime buff who loves the inside scoop on how this whole thing works. If you're interested in knowing more about what I do, mitigation videos, case consults, live teaching, on-demand educational content, books, articles, all of it, please visit www.dougpassonlaw.com. I'm Doug Passon. Until next time, hang in there. Wait a minute, that's a stupid way to sign off on a podcast about sentencing. Hang in there. What's the matter with you, man? I guess they call that gallows humor. Sorry. All right. Well, I will see you next time on Set for Sentencing. Bye-bye.